I observe in Europe's response to the war in Ukraine not merely a security policy crisis, but the brutal unmasking of a decades-long self-deception about Europe's military capacity to act. What has become visible since February 2022 surpasses all pessimistic forecasts regarding European defence weakness. A continent of 450 million people and the world's second-largest economy proves itself entirely incapable of protecting its immediate neighbours from military aggression without relying on American assistance. The irony is unprecedented. While Europe spoke for decades of strategic autonomy and European security interests, it created a defence system that is not even hypothetically functional. This revelation of European weakness occurs at the historic moment when American support for Europe is waning and new threats are emerging that would require European capacity for action. As China rises to superpower status, Russia pursues revisionist ambitions, and the United States focuses on the Pacific region. Europe stands militarily naked, equipped with regulatory ambitions, but without the hard power instruments required to enforce them. The speed with which Europe's defence illusion dissolved is remarkable. Within weeks of the outbreak of war, it became apparent that Europe does not even possess the logistical capacities to provide Ukraine with substantial military assistance, let alone guarantee its own security. The much-praised European defence industry proved to be a collection of national niche producers without the ability for mass production or standardised equipment. Europe's military weakness is rooted in the systematic neglect of defence since the end of the Cold War, legitimised by the illusion of a peace dividend. Europe interpreted the end of the Soviet threat as the permanent disappearance of existential security risks, and reduced defence expenditure in favour of social systems and civilian projects. This decision appeared rational as long as American security guarantees were unconditionally available. At the same time, a civilian power ideology developed that regarded military power as an archaic relic of past eras. Europe was to act through soft power, economic interdependence and normative persuasion, a strategy that functions in a world where all actors accept the same rules, but collapses as soon as violence is used as a political instrument. The institutional structure of the EU systematically reinforced this weakness. While economic integration advanced, defence policy remained nationally fragmented. 27 different armies with varying equipment, doctrines, and command structures cannot simply be merged into a European army. This would require a level of political integration that does not exist in Europe. Germany played a particularly destructive role through its culture of restraint. As the largest European economy, Germany could have assumed leadership in defence policy, but consciously chose military weakness as a foreign policy signal. The Bundeswehr was systematically underfunded and neglected until it degenerated into a dysfunctional bureaucracy with military insignia. The figures document this decline brutally, from 500,000 Bundeswehr soldiers in 1990 to 180,000 today, from 100 battle tanks to fewer than 300 operational units, from a respectable air force to a collection of museum pieces without spare parts. Germany spent less than 1.5% of its GDP on defence, while simultaneously expecting war participation and military solidarity from other NATO partners. France remained the only European power with serious military ambitions, but French capabilities are also limited. The force de frappe can ensure nuclear deterrence, but France cannot simultaneously intervene in Africa, secure the Mediterranean region, and protect Eastern Europe against Russian threats. French attempts to persuade other European countries to engage in military cooperation failed in the face of national egoisms and German refusal. The United States now acts as a reluctant protector that increasingly perceives its European commitments as a burden. Washington's strategic priorities have definitively shifted towards the Pacific region and the containment of China, while Europe is regarded as a secondary interest. This reorientation is not merely Trumpian rhetoric, but a bipartisan American consensus. American frustration over European free riding is justified. The United States effectively finances Europe's defense, while European countries invest their peace dividend in social systems and simultaneously criticize American foreign policy. This asymmetry is unsustainable in the long term and leads to American withdrawal from European commitments. Particularly problematic is the American realization that Europe, even in the face of existential threats, is not prepared to make substantial sacrifices for its own defense. The hesitant and insufficient support for Ukraine demonstrates to American decision-makers that Europe expects to be rescued by others without making corresponding contributions itself. Germany operates as a strategic liability, whose military weakness and political paralysis endanger the entire European security architecture. Berlin can neither assume military leadership nor effectively subordinate itself to American leadership. German pacifism and bureaucratic inertia delay every decision and dilute every initiative. The Bundeswehr has become a symbol of German dysfunction. Scandals involving defective equipment, missing ammunition, and non-operational weapons systems document systemic failure over decades. German soldiers train with broom handles instead of rifles. German fighter jets cannot fly. The German Navy cannot operate. This is not merely military weakness but state failure. At the same time, Germany blocks military initiatives by other European partners through complicated approval procedures, constitutional reservations, and political timidity. German weapons cannot be delivered to parties at war. German soldiers cannot be deployed to combat zones. German intelligence services cannot cooperate with partners. A comprehensive system of self-paralysis. France positions itself as a frustrated leader seeking European defence autonomy, yet lacking the means to compel others to participate. Macron's concept of European sovereignty requires German support and Eastern European cooperation, neither of which is available. French frustrations over German refusal and Eastern European fixation on America lead to France's isolation in European security policy. Paris cannot be solely responsible for European security, but other European partners are either unwilling or incapable of making substantial contributions. Eastern European countries act as American clients who base their security entirely on American guarantees and reject European alternatives. Poland, the Baltic states, and other Eastern European countries trust in American military superiority and distrust European capabilities, a rationally justified position in light of European weakness. These countries invest in American weapons systems, American bases, and American security guarantees while viewing European defense initiatives as ineffective distractions. Their strategy is successful for national security, but destructive for European defense autonomy. Russia systematically exploits European weakness as a strategic advantage. Putin recognized early that Europe is militarily harmless and focused his deterrence strategies on the United States. Russian threats are directed at Washington, not at European capitals, as only American retaliation is credible. In the current development, I recognize three critical escalation paths that fundamentally endanger European security. First, the capability expectations gap leads to a systematic credibility crisis in European foreign policy. Europe formulates ambitious security policy objectives but lacks the military means to enforce them. This discrepancy encourages aggressors and discourages partners, as European threats are recognized as not credible. The Ukraine crisis exemplifies this problem. Europe sharply condemned Russian aggression and imposed extensive sanctions but could not establish credible military deterrence. Russian decision-makers correctly calculated that Europe would not react militarily, regardless of rhetorical escalations. Second, the transatlantic drift is developing into a permanent crisis of the Western alliance. American focus on China and European refusal to commit to substantial defense expenditure lead to systematic estrangement between Washington and European capitals. This estrangement is not only political but operational. American and European armed forces are developing apart, as differing priorities lead to divergent technologies and doctrines. European armies are increasingly unable to interoperate with American systems, a trend that fundamentally threatens NATO effectiveness. Third, the defensive procurement crisis is intensifying into a systemic problem for the European defense industry. Europe can neither produce modern weapon systems in sufficient quantities nor provide the ammunition required for modern warfare. The Ukraine crisis revealed that European defense companies are optimized for peacetime exports rather than wartime production. Complex, expensive systems in small quantities cannot sustain a modern conflict. It requires large quantities of standardized, reliable weapons. I project three likely development paths arising from the European defense crisis. In the first scenario, continued European weakness leads to American recolonization. Europe accepts permanent military dependence on the United States and renounces strategic autonomy in favor of American security guarantees. This solution is stable in the short term but turns Europe into an American protectorate without independent capacity for action. In the second scenario, further American reduction of European commitments triggers a security crisis that forces Europe into substantial defense expenditure. Germany increases military spending to 3–4% of GDP. France assumes European leadership. Eastern European countries accept European rather than American patronage. This transformation is possible but politically traumatic. In the third scenario, European refusal to undertake substantial defense reforms leads to security collapse. American withdrawal meets unchanged European weakness and creates a power vacuum exploited by aggressive powers. Europe becomes a contested sphere of influence between America, Russia, and China. The concrete figures of European defense capabilities document the scale of institutional failure. Germany possesses fewer operational battle tanks than Ukraine had before the war. France cannot deploy more than one brigade outside Europe for an extended period. The United Kingdom has reduced its army to 70,000 soldiers. Particularly critical is the shortage of ammunition and spare parts. European armies can conduct only a few days of intensive combat operations before ammunition stocks are exhausted. The complex supply chains of modern weapons systems are optimized for peacetime production and cannot be rapidly converted to wartime demand. Technologically, Europe lags behind in critical areas. Drone technology, cyber warfare, space operations, and artificial intelligence are primarily developed in the United States and China, while Europe remains a consumer of foreign innovation. What I recognize in Europe's defense crisis is the systematic failure of a continental project that believed it could achieve power without responsibility and security without sacrifice. Europe consciously chose military weakness and American dependence and must now bear the consequences of that decision. The irony is that through peace rhetoric, Europe became more vulnerable to war. Unpreparedness for violence invites aggression, while credible defense capability prevents conflict. Europe's pacifist attitude did not create peace but instability. This self-deception had catastrophic consequences for European credibility. Partners doubted European security guarantees. Adversaries tested European resolve. Neutral actors aligned themselves with more reliable protecting powers. The coming years will show whether Europe is capable of substantial reform or whether it will slide into permanent dependence. The alternative to American patronage is not European autonomy, but anarchy, a condition Europe had avoided since 1945. The war in Ukraine is Europe's final wake-up call. If this war does not lead to a fundamental transformation of European defense policy, there will be no further opportunity.